Through the Looking Glass Part 1 Chapter 12 Dinner. It's been a couple of days since the whole coming late to the house incident, and things at the Whipple household have gone as close to normal as possible. You know, as normal can get for a human and his traumatized hedgehog son. And well, if you ignore the constant nagging from Tom to meet Shadow, Wade loves his friend dearly, but he didn't expect him to be so skeptical of Shadow. Let alone so skeptical that Wade could possibly take care of a kid. First it was doubting his ability to watch over the town, and now this? Sure, Wade didn't have the best track record, but what happened to believing in your friends? He never doubted Tom and I's ability to take care of 3 alien animal kids. Currently, Wade was sitting at his desk, doing nothing really. With Tom back there, hasn't been much for him to do. Speaking of Tom, the man just returned from patrol and was standing over Wade.
So Wade, you busy tonight?
No, why?
Wade began to play with some rubber bands.
Well, Maddie was wondering if you and Shadow would like to come to dinner on our house tonight.
Are you sure?
What do you mean?
Well, your boys didn't seem too thrilled about Shadow the other day.
Yeah, well, that's because the kid threatened Sonic. You're always saying to give the kid a chance, so that's what we're doing.
If you say so.
Wade was still a little skeptical.
Look, Wade, this whole thing may not have started on the right foot, but Maddie was right. Family is family, and it would be wrong of us to not give the kid a chance. You're my best friend, and I trust you. If you care for the kid, who am I to doubt him? Especially if I haven't met him yet. Sonic will come around. All the boys will, I promise.
Wade took in every word Tom said and smiled. This was a step in the right direction.
Okay, dinner would sound great. What time?
6 p.m.
Shadow really loved the gift Wade got him. Ever since he figured out how it worked, he used it every day. It was a way to just escape and be in his own world. A way to relax. Maybe one day Wade could take him to the music shop. Shadow spotted it on one of the mornings he got to ride with Wade as he patrolled. It didn't look super fancy. Nothing in Green Hills really did. But the thought of a whole building just full of different music sounded so fun to explore. Shadow knew they probably wouldn't stay in there long due to his aversion to people. But if Wade was there, it wouldn't be too bad. He should probably just ask the man already. Knowing Wade, it's not likely he would say no. So that was Shadow's plan. Once Wade returned home, he'd ask him if they could go this weekend. To up his chances of getting the man to say yes, Shadow cleaned up the house a bit. He cleaned his room, washed the dishes that were in the sink, put away the dishes that were in the dishwasher, and straightened up the living room. Now all he had to do was wait. Just as usual, the clock turned 5 p.m. and Shadow heard Wade's keys unlock the door. He ran to the door to greet the man. They shared a hug before Wade put him down and went to change out of his uniform. Shadow sat on the couch waiting for the man to come back.
You did the dishes?
Shadow got up and faced the man.
Anna cleaned my room and the living room.
Shadow said with a smile. Wade looked at him suspiciously.
Okay, what do you want?
What do you mean?
Usually when kids do chores without being told, it means they want something.
Shadow plopped onto the couch.
Fine, you got me.
He listened as Wade walked over to the couch and sat beside him. Shadow scooched a bit so his head was now on Wade's lap. He relaxed as the man began to pet his quills.
So, what is it you want, kid?
Despite the soothing feeling of Wade's hand, Shadow was still a bit nervous to answer.
I was wondering if we could go to the music shop, the one near the thrift store.
Wade's petting stopped, but only for a moment.
You sure you're ready for that?
Maybe not for long, but we could go in for 5 minutes?
5 minutes?
Yeah.
Wade lifted Shadow so now he was fully in his lap with Wade's arms wrapped around him. Shadow didn't mind. He craved physical affection anyway.
That's very brave of you, kid. I'm proud of you for wanting to go out of your comfort zone.
Shadow smiled at his words. Who knew he was such a sucker for parental praise?
We'll go this weekend on one condition.
One condition. Shadow thought that cleaning was supposed to be enough.
You have to behave yourself at dinner tonight.
Dinner? What was he talking about? Shadow always behaved at dinner.
What are you talking about, Wade?
Shadow removed himself from Wade's hold to get a better look at the man. He looked nervous, like he didn't want to answer Shadow's question. That was strange. Wade was always willing to answer his questions.
Well, Tom and Maddie invited us to dinner tonight.
Shadow wasn't sure how to respond. He didn't really want to meet the Wachowskis. Sure, they were Wade's friends and he trusted them, but he still felt uncomfortable about the incident that happened over the phone.
Are you sure?
Wade reached out and held Shadow's hands in his.
Tom promised that they'd all give you a chance. You're a good kid. They just need to see it, just like I do.
Wade ended his words with a smile. How was Shadow supposed to say no now?
You promise that we'll go to the music shop?
I promise.
Okay.
The two got ready to go over to the Wachowski house. Shadow decided to bring his CD player in case he needed to relax. The ride over to their house was smooth. The sky wasn't fully dark yet, but you could still see the moon slightly peeking through the clouds. Shadow wasn't the biggest fan of the dark, but he loved the stars. The way they shined so bright. Maria loved them too. Shadow watched as Wade pulled into a gravel path that led to a big house. On the outside, it looked like a lot more modern than their house, and bigger too. Wade parked the patrol car next to a pickup truck. Shadow was pretty sure he was supposed to use work property when not on the clock. But what are you supposed to do when that's the only vehicle you had? Once Shadow stepped out of the car, the gravity of what was about to happen hit him. He didn't want to mess this up for Wade. Yeah, he wanted to go to the music shop, but he also didn't want to embarrass Wade and give him a reason to get rid of him. So lost in thought, Shadow didn't realize that they were now at the front door. Wade rung the doorbell, and the two stood there waiting. When the door swung open, Shadow was greeted by two faces staring at him. They didn't say anything, just stared. Shadow didn't like that.
Are you all done staring?
The kid's right. Now come on in.
She seemed nice and had a calm smile. The lady and the man made room for the two of them to enter the home. It was nice, spacious, and modern. Almost the complete opposite of their home. Shadow looked around and saw that the table was already set, and could smell something delicious in the air. The woman led Shadow and Wade to the couch. Shadow watched as Wade hugged the two people and exchanged pleasantries. He wanted to sit down, but wasn't sure. When Wade was done, he tugged on her shirt. Wade looked down at Shadow. After almost 2 weeks of living together, the two had formed a way to understand what the other was thinking without saying anything.
You can sit if you want, kid. It's okay.
Wade's reassurance let Shadow finally sit on the couch. It was comfy, he had to admit. Once he was settled, the man and woman faced him. The woman was the first to extend her hand to Shadow. He knew what this meant. He shook her hand.
Hi there. I'm Maddie. Nice to meet you.
So this was Maddie. The man didn't shake his hand, but from behind his wife he introduced himself.
Tom, nice to meet you.
The smile Tom gave didn't seem as sincere as Maddie's, but Shadow could tell he was trying.
Hello.
Was all Shadow could say. He knew this was a normal part of interacting with people, but he hated it. It all felt so awkward. He felt the couch shift as Wade sat down next to him. Shadow moved closer to him, leaning into his side. Wade's warmth was calming, and Shadow could feel himself relaxing. That is, until Maddie yelled for the boys to come downstairs. The reply she got came from the most agitating, grating voice he's ever heard. He recognized it as the voice from the phone. Sonic, that's what Wade called the voice when they were at home. Shadow was dreading meeting him. He sat still in his seat as a gust of wind filled the room. He watched as a blue hedgehog stood at the bottom of the steps. A small fox came flying down not long after, with the red echidna right behind him. Shadow wasn't really paying much attention to their conversation, instead focusing on the new animals in the room. If he remembered correctly, the fox and the echidna were named Tails and Knuckles. Shadow observed the energy the three gave off. They weren't powerless like Wade. They seemed strong. The whole Wachowski family did. There was something about them. Shadow didn't like it. He felt trapped. He was going to put his headphones on and listen to some music to calm down, but was interrupted.
You gonna introduce yourself, kid?
Shadow looked up at Wade and then turned his eyes to the whole Wachowski family standing in front of them. He studied their faces. Tom and Maddie had the same calming smile expressions on their faces. The fox looked nervous, but Shadow could see a glint in his eyes like the kid wanted to ask him questions. The echidna looked intrigued but also a bit on guard, like he was waiting for Shadow's next move. The other hedgehog just looked mad. There was no other way to describe it. It was clear that Sonic didn't want him here, and Shadow wasn't too upset because he didn't want to be here either.
Shadow.
Was all he said. He felt that the less he interacted with the others, the better. However, that answer didn't seem to satisfy the animals in front of him. Tails soon began to bombard him with questions. Sonic just stared at him. Shadow hated people staring.
So you're a hedgehog like Sonic? Can you run as fast like him? How old are you? Are you from the same planet as Sonic?
He could feel his willpower lessening. Tails was just invading his space without permission. Tails wouldn't shut up. He wanted to go home and eat pizza with Wade. He clenched his fists.
Hey guys, why don't you back up? Give the kid some space.
He heard Wade say. He must have noticed his distress.
Wade's right. The food is ready anyway, so questions can wait until after you all wash your hands.
He watched as the boys begrudgingly walked away and towards what Shadow assumed was the bathroom. On their way, Shadow noticed Sonic side-eyeing him.
You too, buddy.
Wade said as he stood up from the couch. Shadow followed Wade towards the bathroom. There was now a line at the small half bathroom on the first floor. He watched as each person washed and walked towards the kitchen. Once they were gone, it was just Shadow left. He squirted some of the lemon-scented soap on his hands and turned to the warm water. As he washed his hands, he felt something tugging at him. It wasn't something physical, but something spiritual, like a pull to the type of energy. He couldn't see it, but the energy felt familiar, like it was calling his name. Shadow blinked to snap out of it and walked back out to the kitchen. Everyone was already sitting at the table. He found the one free spot next to Wade and sat there. He felt Wade tap his shoulder.
You good, kid?
Wade whispered quietly enough so only Shadow heard. He nodded his head and felt Wade rub his hand over Shadow's knuckles. It was an action that Wade knew helped calm Shadow down. Shadow sat and observed as everyone grabbed scoops of the food in the pot. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do. Wade grabbed their plates and put some of the stringy sauce-covered stuff on them.
What's this?
It's spaghetti.
Spaghetti. That really didn't tell him what it was. He saw everyone dig their forks and twirl the stuff around them. He followed their actions and put the food in his mouth. It was surprisingly okay. Not pizza or anything, but he could definitely keep eating it. After a couple of moments of silence, Tom looked up from his plate and was the first to say anything.
So, Shadow, what's it like staying with Wade?
Shadow gulped down the last bite of spaghetti on his fork.
It's nice.
Shadow didn't want to do this.
Just nice?
Yes.
Wade seemed to be the only one not bothered by his short responses. Shadow went for another fork full of spaghetti.
Are you the enemy?
Knuckles asked, looking straight into Shadow's eyes.
Only if you make me one.
Shadow just wanted to eat.
What are those gold things on your wrists?
They're inhibitor rings.
What do they do?
They inhibit. It's in their name.
He must have sounded too harsh, because the kid didn't look as excited anymore.
Oh, okay.
They stopped me from using all my power.
The fox seemed to perk up at the response. Shadow hated having the attention on him. Luckily, we'd asked them a question.
Why don't you guys tell him about saving Green Hills? I'm sure Shadow would love to hear it.
He didn't really care, but at least the focus wasn't on him anymore. Shadow zoned out most of the story. It was a bit hard to believe anything they were saying. What type of villain name was Dr. Eggman? But must be true, if they all agreed so much on the details.
Crazy adventure, right, Shadow?
That was Shadow's cue to pretend he cared.
It was interesting. I do have one question though. What type of name is Dr. Eggman anyway?
That's just a nickname.
Yeah, his real name is Dr. Robotnik.
At the mention of the name, Shadow froze and the sharp ring of his fork hitting the floor echoed in the room. He looked up and stared at the Wachowskis with a look of pure fear that he'd never admit to.
What did you just say?